The air inside the bombed-out building was thick with dust and smoke, every breath tasting of grit and blood. Gunfire cracked outside, echoing like thunder through the broken walls. Amid the chaos, the stairwell stretched upward, like a mountain carved of concrete. 200 steps to the roof, where evacuation awaited. Corporal James Jimmy Walker, a Marine barely 23, lay slumped against the wall, his leg torn open by shrapnel. He tried to rise, muscles trembling, but collapsed again. His rifle clattered uselessly at his side. "Go," he croaked, his voice barely audible. "Save yourself." But the woman standing above him refused to move. Her name was Claire Donovan, a combat medic. Her uniform smeared with blood that wasn't all hers. Her eyes locked on his, unflinching. "I don't leave Marines behind," she said, her tone like steel. She crouched, sliding his arm over her shoulders, the weight of his body pressing down like stone. He groaned in pain, but she pulled him up step by step. The stairwell stretched endlessly, each riser another battle. Her boots scraped, her muscles screamed, but her grip never faltered. Bullets punched into the walls behind them, fragments spraying their path. Still she climbed. 10 steps, 20, 50. Sweat drenched her face, her breath ragged. But she carried him as if the weight itself gave her purpose. Jimmy tried to protest, whispering between gasps. "You can't make it?" "Not 200. Claire gritted her teeth, hauling him higher. "Watch me!" The stairwell seemed to twist, stretching into infinity, but she never stopped. Her strength wasn't in her muscles, it was in her will. Step after step. She carried not just his body, but the unspoken promise of the Corps. No one gets left behind. By the time they burst onto the roof, the helicopter blades thundered overhead, whipping smoke into the sky. Claire collapsed to her knees, Jimmy still clinging to her. Her body was trembling, her arms raw and burning, but she had made it. As Marines pulled them aboard, Jimmy's vision blurred, his world fading into unconsciousness. The last thing he saw was Claire's face streaked with sweat and ash, eyes blazing with unbroken fire. And in that moment he knew she hadn't just saved his life. She had become part of his story forever. The next time Jimmy opened his eyes, the world was different. White ceilings replaced shattered concrete. The thundering of gunfire was gone, replaced by the steady beeping of monitors. Pain radiated through his body, but the steady rhythm of life was undeniable. He had survived. At his bedside sat Claire, her arm in a sling, her uniform traded for hospital scrubs. Exhaustion lined her face, but her eyes still burned with that same stubborn fire. She gave him a tired smile. "Told you I'd get you out." Jimmy swallowed hard, his throat dry. Words failed him, emotion choking out anything he could say. Finally he managed, "Why? You risked your life for me." "You could have died." Claire leaned forward, her voice steady. "Because that's what Marines do. We fight for each other. We carry each other when we have to. You would have done the same." He wanted to argue, to deny he could have matched her strength. But the conviction in her voice silenced him. She wasn't boasting. She was stating a truth carved into her bones. Over the next days, Jimmy's wounds were treated, his leg bound in steel and stitches, but Claire never disappeared. She checked on him between her own treatments, stood guard when nightmares shook him awake, and reminded him again and again that he was alive because someone refused to let go. Word of what happened spread quickly through the ranks. Stories whispered in chow halls, retold in barracks, passed from one Marine to another. The tale of Claire Donovan, carrying a brother in arms up 200 steps, under fire, was more than just a story. It was legend in the making. Jimmy promised himself then and there, one day he'd repay her. Somehow. But he didn't yet realize that it wouldn't just be him who felt that way. A tide was already rising, unseen but unstoppable, and it would soon crash down around Claire in a way she never expected. 2 weeks later, Claire returned stateside, her arm still in a sling, but her spirit steady as stone. She wanted to fade back into routine, to slip into anonymity as though nothing extraordinary had happened. To her, carrying Jimmy up those stairs had not been heroism. It had simply been duty. In her mind, she had acted as any Marine would. But Marines talk, and the Corps is a family whose stories echo far and wide. At her small apartment, envelopes already crowded the mailbox. Handwritten letters from Marines she had never met, families of the fallen. even veterans of past wars who had long since hung up their uniforms. Their words bled gratitude. You reminded us what Semper Fi truly means. Claire sat at her table reading them, her chest tight with emotion. She had saved one life, but somehow it had touched hundreds. Phone calls followed. Former commanders, medics who had served before her, retired generals with voices gravelly from age, each called to say the same thing, that what she had done mattered far beyond the stairwell. Claire thanked them politely, but she was uneasy under the weight of so much attention. She had not carried Jimmy for recognition. She had done it because a Marine had been down. Yet stories have a life of their own. Reporters picked it up, first local, then national. Military forums buzzed. Headlines read, "Combat. Medic carries wounded Marine up. 200 stairs to safety." Jimmy called her from rehab, voice thick with emotion. "Claire, you're not just a medic anymore. You're a symbol." She laughed softly, trying to dismiss it. But deep down, she felt the tide rising. She had climbed those stairs with Jimmy on her shoulders, but now, something far bigger was climbing toward her. It began with a rumble. Claire was pouring coffee on a quiet morning when the sound of engines rolled through her street. At first, she thought it was heavy traffic, but the rumble deepened, multiplied until the very pavement seemed to tremble. She stepped outside and froze. The street was lined with vehicles, motorcycles gleaming in the sun, trucks packed with Marines, even a few Humvees borrowed from bases nearby. Men and women stood in rows, their uniforms crisp, their bearing unmistakable. 500 Marines filled her block, shoulder to shoulder, their presence a wall of loyalty and pride. Neighbors peeked from windows, stunned. Children waved flags. And at the front stood Jimmy, balanced on crutches, his uniform pressed, his face pale but determined. His voice rang out across the street. Strong despite the strain in his body, "This woman carried me when I could not walk. She saved me when death was certain, and she did it not for medals, not for glory, but because she refused to leave me behind." That's what a Marine is. That's what family is. The roar that answered him shook the air. "Oorah!" 500 voices thundered as one, rattling windows echoing like rolling artillery. Claire's hand rose to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. She had walked into fire for one Marine, and now 500 had come to stand for her. They brought no speeches carved on plaques, no polished ceremony. What they carried was far heavier, the unshakable weight of brotherhood. For Claire, the moment eclipsed the agony of every step she had climbed. That day, on her quiet street, she understood. Her strength had carried Jimmy, but her act had lifted the Corps itself. The gathering did not end on her street. Photos spread across social media before the last Marine had even left. Headlines followed within hours. 500 Marines honor medic who carried one of their own. To the public, it was a heartwarming story. To the Corps, it was scripture. Claire found herself pulled into interviews, ceremonies, official commendations. Generals praised her. Veterans saluted her. Civilians called her a hero. Each time, her answer was the same. "I carried him because he needed me. That's it." She would not dress it in glory. To her, it was simple. Marines never leave each other behind. Jimmy always stood beside her when he could, a living testament to her will. And whenever she tried to downplay her act, he spoke up, his voice fierce. "She's a hero! She's the reason I'm alive." His scars bore witness more powerfully than any medal could. Years passed, yet the story refused to fade. New recruits heard it whispered during boot camp. Veterans retold it at reunions, their voices low with reverence. It became a parable of the Corps, a living reminder of what Semper Fi truly meant. Claire herself never sought the spotlight. She went back to her work, serving quietly, still refusing to let another Marine fall if she could stop it. But she carried something else now, the knowledge that her climb up, those 200 steps, had become more than survival. It had become legacy. For in every telling, her name carried with it the truth. She had lived. Courage is not found in grand speeches or medals, but in the moment one person decides to carry another, no matter how steep the climb. And on that day, when 500 Marines filled her street, she learned she had never climbed alone.